I'm Lene Hood. I'm Associate Professor of Food and Nutrition at Meredith College. I've been studying college hunger for about the past decade with my wonderful collaborator.
I'm Becca Hagedorn-Hatfield, and I'm an Assistant Professor in Food and Nutrition. And today we're going to talk about food insecurity and kind of our experiences.
Becca, I know both you and I are first-generation college students from Appalachia. So what was that like for you? You went to a really big university and I went to a private college.
Yeah. So really exciting, being the first one in your family to go to college, but it's also incredibly stressful. So having to kind of navigate the waters without a lot of guidance is really difficult. So I spent a lot of time working, trying to, stay successful in the classroom, but a lot of stress with having to, pay for books, pay for rent, pay for the car, all of the things that go along with, living while you're in college. What was your experience like?
So I went to a private college, but I was probably the poorest kid on my campus. So I grew up in rural Alabama. My family always got food stamps when I was growing up. So when I got to college, the only thing that kept me from being food insecure was having a meal plan. However, unlike my peers, I worked about 3 jobs throughout college. So one of the first things I did when I turned 18 was I got a credit card. And I know that you had mentioned that before too in our conversations, that we had to kind of rely on those other financial methods because our family couldn't give us money.
Yeah, and I didn't have a meal plan, so that kind of protective factor I didn't have. So there were definitely times that I didn't have access to food, where you would eat one time a day, and oftentimes it was the dollar menu at Wendy's, which as a nutrition student, I knew that wasn't the route that I needed to be going, but from a caloric standpoint, I knew, I needed to have food. So it was kind of this tug and pull between what I knew I should be doing, but also, just having to get by, which was really difficult. So we talk about food insecurity a lot. How would you define food insecurity in kind of just a basic terms?
So in a nutshell, food insecurity means you don't know where your next meal is coming from. So maybe it's anxiety and worry about running out of food, or maybe having to skip meals or eat less healthy meals like you said. So food insecurity is not just about being hungry. There are so many other factors that go into that.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that was, one of the things with my college experience, that it was that anxiety component of just not knowing where that meal was going to come from. And I think that's what we see oftentimes on college campuses. But we also see this, stigma or perception that college students are supposed to experience that. And there's this idea that we have this ramen noodle lifestyle on a college campus. And by ramen noodle diet, we really mean all of those processed foods. So not just focusing on ramen, because ramen can be really nutritionally rich. But we're talking about, the frozen pizzas and the instant mac and cheese, the things that you can get for 75 cents in the grocery store that isn't leading to a well-balanced, healthy diet.
Absolutely. And a lot of Americans kind of consider, eating ramen and being broke as a rite of passage in the college environment. And really that shouldn't be the case, because college students are set up for failure if they are food insecure.
So we talked about being first generation as, a risk factor for food insecurity. What are some other factors that you've seen, increase that risk for college students?
So there are a lot of risk factors for college students. Some of that we've seen in our research at least is being from certain racial and ethnic groups. Also, coming from a food insecure background puts you a lot more at risk, and sometimes that goes hand in hand with being a first generation student. Also, students who have dependents, so that could be a child, it could also be a family member that they have to take care of, as well as students who come from international countries. They often can't access the resources that U.S. citizens can, as well as just being from a lower socioeconomic status. So in my case, although I wasn't food insecure because of my meal plan, as soon as I graduated from college, I was immediately food insecure because I did not have any family resources that I could pull from. So one of the key points is really that food insecurity can be on any college campus, public university, private university, and it really is a pervasive issue that needs to be addressed. It is starting to get a lot more attention, but colleges and universities have really struggled to figure it out.
So what happens to students when they are food insecure? How do they go about getting by with this issue?
The number one thing we've seen across all campuses is that students will first sacrifice the quality of their food for quantity. So that basically means eating less healthy meals. And that's where that ramen noodle diet comes into play. Another thing that we notice is that students will do a little bit more risky things to access food. So maybe they're going to use a credit card to buy food and go more into debt. They might also borrow money from friends and family or share food with roommates. They'll also go to campus functions where there's free pizza or free food that they can access.
So we know that students who become ingrained in campus are more likely to stay here and be successful, but food insecure students oftentimes shy away from those social events because they can't afford to go out with their friends and eat food. So oftentimes they're a little bit more isolated than others.
Most of them are working not only one job, but sometimes 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. And that certainly impacts their ability to be social on campus. You know, something that I experienced was that my friends would all get to hang out and I'm going, to work as a receptionist in town.
We see so many other consequences that these food insecure students, are struggling with. So things like academics. So research showing us that oftentimes their GPA is a little bit lower, whether that's due to the stress of being food insecure, the burden of having to work a full-time job, which really limits your success in the classroom, but even just being hungry. It's really hard to learn when you're dealing with, feeling hungry. We know that food insecure college students are really burdened with feelings of poor health, whether that is physical health or poor mental health, so depression and anxiety.
That really sets them up for failure in terms of being able to graduate on time. They are more likely to drop out of college if they're struggling with food insecurity. The bottom line is that every student wants to be successful in college. That's why they're here. They want a high GPA. They want that career preparation for the next steps.
So what are some things that you think would help students be successful?
So one of the most popular options is obviously the food pantry. A food pantry should be in a prominent location on campus. So prominent location, I mean like a library or a student union or student center. And the point of that is really to normalize that pantry so that everyone can see it, everyone gets comfortable using it, and it really kind of reduces that stigma barrier. So Meredith College has a food pantry. It's called the Daisy Trade that students can access. But a food pantry is really only a band-aid to a bigger problem. We've also seen a lot of initiatives surrounding things like a campus garden or maybe bringing like a farmer's market to campus. And those are, less utilized but still present. One of the main ones that has, a lot of national advocacy are meal swipe programs. So one of those is called Swipe Out Hunger. They're an amazing organization. And they basically allow students to donate meal swipes to the dining hall to each other. So if you have a friend that's struggling, you can donate some of your meal plan to them. There's also quite a few programs like campus kitchens that try to capture food that would otherwise be wasted. So we mentioned all these different things that college campuses are doing to deal with food insecurity. What about what's happening at Meredith? I do a lot of initiatives with the Daisy Trade, including a meal kit program. So meal kits are basically like a grab and go option where they can make a quick, healthy dinner. However, I know that you've been involved in a number of things recently. So what have you been up to?
So we just ran a hunger week on campus, ultimately to raise awareness of this problem. So we did a basic needs fair where students were able to come out and see the different resources such as your meal kits and the Daisy Trade, as well as counseling resources. We did a share your plate workshop where students could come and design what home means to them or what a meal means to them. And we used that as a social media campaign for them to tag politicians and the local media to raise awareness that not everybody has a place at the table. We did a wonderful hunger banquet where participants came in and they randomly drew what socioeconomic status they were going to be in. And that's how life goes. It's luck of the draw as to what we are born into. So there are individuals who had to eat their meal on the floor, some that were in the middle class, and then a few that were in the upper class that got a full service meal. But ultimately we know in the world that a majority of the people are just born into that lower class and have to really climb their way up to have a secure access to food.
When your grad students created this awesome Hunger Week website, and part of that includes this interactive map of campus resources, so students get a sense of all the different areas on campus they can go if they're struggling.
And that's really nice for a student that might not feel comfortable going up to their professor and asking, what's available, but having that online where they can discreetly, find those resources themselves, I think is really valuable for us to have on campus.
Agreed.
So we see a model from other campuses that has been implemented that, potentially could work here at Meredith College, especially getting to some of that barriers with going to locations on campus, and that's online ordering from the food pantry. So I know the University of Tennessee, Knoxville has implemented an ordering program where students can get online, choose the foods that they would like. It's discreetly packaged for them in a brown bag, and they could pick it up at locations on campus.
Yeah, that's a great idea. For our meal kits, we've been doing a QR code that people can scan to sign up to get a meal kit delivered to them. If college campuses are doing things like food pantries and gardens and all of these innovative meal programs, how are we measuring the success of that, and how do we know how to tell other campuses how to do it? And so that's why, this evaluation piece is really important. So in some of our work, we've discovered that there are a lot of barriers to doing these types of initiatives well. First and foremost, funding. You and I have been really lucky that we got small amounts of grant money to carry out our hunger awareness campaigns. I presently have a grant where I'm doing cooking classes with students to try to give them those basic skills they need to be successful with food. So funding is a really big piece of the puzzle, but also staffing. Who's going to actually lead these programs? At Meredith, our food pantry is run by the chaplain's office, but of course all kinds of advocates around campus get involved in that in various ways. I think our biggest struggle is really stigma. College students are still reluctant to utilize resources because they're embarrassed. So how do we really normalize using the food pantry and asking for help and tapping into those resources that are available? And I think that is something that isn't necessarily a quick fix. It's definitely going to take us winning kind of like hearts and minds to address that stigma issue.
Students often think that, somebody just has it worse than they do. I'm going to save this resource for somebody who really needs it. And it's really getting students, to just understand that if you need it today, that's fine. And you should go and access that resource because those resources are there for all students in need.
Something else we've seen is that students do want to support other students. Absolutely. And so that's a key thing in helping us remove that stigma, I think. Because this generation of college students in particular really are supportive of each other. And I think if we could leverage that, it would help campuses be more successful.
Absolutely. And as part of this work, we developed the Angels Are Aware campaign to really listen to our campus. So with that, we're talking to students, faculty, staff to see what they think would work. Students who are going through food insecurity are the ones who are going to best be able to tell you what they need. So really listening to your community, I think, is how you make the best change on a campus.
Absolutely. And I think a pitfall of some of the work that's been done already is that it's not student-led. One of our main calls to action is really, putting that the path forward into the hands of students, letting them tell us what do they need, what is going to best support them, and then us to figure out how can we make that work on our campus.
Right. And I will say we have so many students that are interested in this topic that, they want to jump in, and I definitely see some good change coming in the future.
And every campus is different. So our best advice to other campuses is to do what works for your specific situation on your campus. One thing that would really help us bolster our efforts on campus is to, involve alumni and having alumni really donate to these causes, specifically to, the Chaplains Fund, the Daisy Trade Fund, because that allows us to continue working with students directly to, enhance life skills, provide them with direct access to food, and also help us continue to really, lobby with the administration to get these changes in place that will most help students. And here we're really privileged at Meredith that people do listen to us, they do want to be engaged on the topic, and they are open to making changes that will best support our students. Because ultimately, we want students to be successful, we want them to graduate and go out in the world and make an impact. Absolutely. And that's really, what it's all about.